Hello, and thank you for joining us here on the Neutral Zone. I am Phil Milani, joined as always by my trusty sidekick, my partner in crime. Really, the best way to describe this person is my everything. It's at Eric Dalala.
Phil, good to be with you. Thanks for having me on the show.
I always love to have you on as you're a welcome guest, Eric.
Yeah, very recurring guest almost every week.
Eric, we have got a great show in store for NZ Nation here today. A lot of stuff to break down following the draft. A lot of things to get into. The Broncos, of course, take Pat Surtain the second. We'll go one-on-one with the Broncos' first-round pick. Get his thoughts on, joining a legacy of great defensive backs in Broncos history. You go all the way back, Louis Wright, Billy Thompson, and then even more recently, Champ Bailey, Aqib Talib, Chris Harris Jr. Could Pat Surtain join that group, Eric? We asked him that question and what he thought about that. We'll talk about the remaining questions that the Broncos have now. What positions are still a little bit iffy? You think that's fair to say that, Eric?
I think so.
I think that right tackle, considering Jawan James's injury now, would qualify under the iffy category.
It would, yeah. Tough news to get right after the draft.
Yeah. And then we'll say, hey, looking at this team on paper, does this feel like a playoff team, Eric? Pretty big question. We'll have to dive in and see what the answer is. So
yeah.
A pretty good show in store here, a post-draft show. Feels good to have the draft behind us, doesn't it, Eric?
Yeah, let's get on to the schedule release, Phil. I've been waiting for a year, and I'm excited to finally have the schedule.
Have you checked out any mock schedules yet?
I've been putting together a few of my own. We'll have one on denverbroncos.com next week, Phil, but try to ignore the noise and just focus on what you can control.
Who does Mel Kiper have us opening with?
That is a good question, though. Maybe we'll have to bring that up toward the end of the show. What's your ideal starting matchup? I'll let you think about that for a little bit here. Marinate on it.
Marinate. The schedule comes out next Tuesday? Is that what you said?
Next Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot
That's
of
what
time.
Our whole show's going to be about next week, Phil.
A lot of time to break that down. Eric, you know that we like to make the Neutral Zone an interactive show.
I've heard that, yeah.
If you're watching here on YouTube, you can comment below, smash that subscribe button right there. Eric, you could also leave a voicemail. We have a voicemail to get to at the end of the show here, 707-NEUTRAL. Pick up the phone, leave a voicemail, and we'll play it right here on the show. Eric, there's another way you could leave an email or something.
Yeah, you could leave an email at neutralzoneshow@gmail.com. We'll get back to you. Ben Swanson forwards all of those along as he continues to audition for podcast supervisor.
He does.
He's done okay, but we're always looking to improve. We're looking for competition at every position, just like George Payton. So
yes.
Maybe send a resume too if you send a take to neutralzoneshow@gmail.com.
We're willing to trade for a podcast supervisor at this point.
Oh man.
Yeah, if we need to.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ben. I'm just saying he is available on the market if anybody wants Ben.
I have heard that the best podcast supervisors are not available. They do not going to be traded.
I heard there is one podcast supervisor out there disgruntled at their current job. There's a rift there. Could be available. One of the best podcast supervisors.
We're not going to plan on that though, Phil.
We
like who we have in Ben Swanson. We like who we have in Ben Swanson.
Yeah.
But we're always open to improving the podcast supervisor room.
Even if it's just a depth role, we could always use some depth at the supervisor spot too.
So.
Yeah. You can also hit us up on Twitter at Eric Dalala with an A, at Phil Milani with a PH. Non-traditional spellings there, but those are the best ways to get involved with the show here. And Eric, with that, let's get to our first topic here. Let's talk about the draft, general takeaways. Before we get your thoughts there, though, I must take one moment here, Eric. I believe that listeners of the Neutral Zone will be familiar with that. Just last week before the draft, I predicted that Pat Surtain would be the pick for the Broncos. Not just that, Eric. We also were like, what would be a bold take? What would be a bold take? And I said taking a running back in the second round. I was a little bit off there, Eric. I should have said trade it up to get a running back. I did not say that. I just said running back. But I must take a moment here to just sort of enjoy my seat here on the throne.
Phil, I've heard many times, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. So congratulations to you on your picks that were formed geniusly in your brain. That massive, lots going on in there.
There's a lot going on.
I'll kind of just keep it at that, I guess.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that, because even a couple of weeks ago, we did a pool where we each picked a player. We've picked a few players, and I said Surtain was part of that grouping as well for me as well. So it's just
it's like you knew. It's like you knew.
Nostradamus Milani.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've got that sixth sense that just you targeted. You knew.
Yep.
I'm impressed. Good for you.
I did my homework, Eric.
You did your homework.
A lot of people, when they comment, they're like, I really enjoy Phil's passion and the way that he just sort of guides the show a little bit. But we really come for Eric's football knowledge. That's like a general theme amongst the commenters. Yet I'm the one here correctly predicting the picks. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I did predict the Baron Browning pick. That was nice. You had never heard of Baron Browning before they announced the pick, so
yeah, I knew Baron Browning.
Yeah,
the Baron.
That's what his friends call him.
Yeah. That's a type of frozen pizza, right? You could pick that up at King Soopers.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that pizza.
Yeah. Eric, you also said that you not only were on the quarterback train, you were the conductor. You also said that the Broncos had the option there, Justin Fields or Pat Surtain or trade back. They decided to go with Surtain. Just your general takeaways here from what the Broncos did last weekend.
Yeah, you brought all the receipts here, Phil. It's grown on me the longer we've gotten away from the draft, just because I do think the more I watch of Pat Surtain, the more I read about him, listening to Champ Bailey talk about how impressed he was with Pat Surtain, I do think he's going to be, or could be, a generational type player for Denver. He could be that 10-year cornerback that is an all-pro, a Pro Bowler, has the potential, certainly talented enough to be a guy that could someday be a Ring of Famer, maybe a Hall of Famer if everything breaks right. So I like that, and I do think, Phil, I think he could be the best cornerback on the field midway through this season. I don't think that that's a stretch. I think that people concerned with how they're going to get him on the field might want to think about how are they going to get the other guys on the field, because I think Surtain's going to earn his role and earn it quickly. I think he profiles as a number one guy by early next year on the depth chart, following top receivers maybe, would give Denver an option there that they haven't necessarily had in the past. But all that said, Phil, this pick is going to be tied to, one, how Justin Fields performs in Chicago. If Justin Fields goes out and is a Pro Bowler, is a Hall of Famer, it's going to be, this is always going to be connected. You're always going to wonder, what if? The other connection, and kind of, I think what George Payton did, was he decided the combination of Pat Surtain, Drew Lock, and Teddy Bridgewater was better than the potential of Justin Fields. Now, it's not, he may think that head-to-head Justin Fields is better than Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater. We don't know. He has not been asked that specifically. I don't know that he would even answer that if you asked him, but I think the combination of getting Surtain. So the other thing that you'll have to look for is if Drew Lock comes out and plays well and takes a step, or if Teddy Bridgewater comes out and plays like he did when he led the Vikings to a playoff berth, then this pick is going to look great, because you've taken care of the quarterback position. You've added a really good defensive player. But Phil, I think we're going to look at this pick for a long time and tie it both to the quarterbacks that Denver has and the quarterback that they do not have because of this pick.
And that tends to happen in drafts anyway, where people get linked together and then they say, okay, how did these two players compare? That happens all the time. I think the Broncos found themselves in a position where they did not expect to have to make that decision between Justin Fields being available at number 9 or the option of Pat Surtain or trading back. I don't think that they thought that Fields was going to be available. But I will say, Eric, and I've talked about this a little bit here previously, is that the lead up to the draft this year was unlike any other. There was no combine, there was no in-facility visits. There was just a different feel to the months leading up to the draft. So that was one element. The other element is that George Paton came into a new team, a new scenario here where he's using all of the scouts and personnel department that had been here under John Elway. None of these guys were his own hires, so the whole scouting process was with a different team of people than he's hired. So he's trusting scouts that he did not hire. So I think you think about those two things there, you tend to go with a bit of a safer pick in my mind. If you just weigh all of those options, you say Pat Surtain was a really safe pick because you meet this kid. He's a pro. He has a pro mentality. He's soft-spoken, but you can feel the confidence with him. His dad played in the NFL for a long time, was a 3-time Pro Bowler. George Paton knew his father, so what kind of family he's coming from. What kind of character this kid was. He was a 5-star recruit in high school, was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year last year, first team All-American, 6'2", 208 pounds. I mean, he just checks every single box. So in a year where there might be some weirdness there, Pat Surtain is everything that you're looking for. He's pretty much a slam dunk here to have a long career. And like you mentioned, he could be a multi-Pro Bowler type of player at a position that is really valued, especially in this division. You're talking about Pat Mahomes. You're talking about Justin Herbert, what the Raiders are doing. You need guys who can cover. And
what are the Raiders doing, Phil?
Well, John Gruden is still there. So you expect that offense to be dynamic as long as John Gruden's there. So I think there's a lot to like about Pat Surtain. It's a position of need, and I think that you feel comfortable with that pick.
Yeah, no, I agree that as far as picks go, he's about as safe as you can get. The floor is very high, you'd think, but again, every draft pick is a leap of faith to some degree. So you hope that Surtain pans out the way that you want him to, but you're right. It is a pick that, George Paton said in his post-draft press conference, I've been scouting this guy for 3 years. I've been watching him for a long time. I know his character. I know his dad's character. I know what we're going to get from this guy. It was very much a sure thing, I think. And, who knows if the Broncos would have taken a quarterback in a different situation. It's quite possible that George Paton evaluated Justin Fields and said, this isn't the guy, or this isn't an upgrade from what we have, or, we're not going to take our chance with somebody like this. We don't really know. We don't know what his individual assessment is. And so it's possible he could have had his own scouts in place. He could have had every single visit, and maybe that just would have confirmed his decision to go a different direction. We don't know. Denver was not the only team to pass on Justin Fields. Detroit was a place that he could have gone. Carolina was a place he could have gone. Denver, of course, he fell to 11. And there were teams, Phil, that could have traded up to get him at 7 or 8 or 9 even. So interesting to think about. But yeah, I think Surtain is going to be one of those picks that in a few years you're going to be like, man, I'm really glad we have him, because this defense has a lot of veteran players, but it doesn't have a ton of young talent, and you need to replenish this. Now you've got Surtain, Chubb, Justin Simmons, Draymond Jones. You can look at that as a core of a young defense that rivals how good that young offense is, and that's the way you keep a team successful, as we've heard George Paton say many times.
it should be a top 3 defense. I mean, no questions about it, especially if everybody stays healthy. This should be a top 3 defense in the NFL. They've got every single position other than, I mean, you might have some questions about the depth at interior defensive line, maybe interior linebacker. You just you don't have like that Pro Bowl caliber player, maybe necessarily, but you've got some solid starters there. So
Right.
I think that you got to be happy with how the defense looks here, especially bringing Surtain into the mix. Eric, and we're going to hear from Surtain here in just a second. Had a chance to catch up with him during his visit to UC Health Training Center. But as far as the rest of the draft goes, the Broncos bring in an explosive running back. They added a wide receiver in the later rounds, brought in some safety depth, brought in some edge rusher type of players. What do you think about the rest of the draft as a whole?
Yeah, I liked the aggressiveness to go up and get Javonte Williams. I know that some people were confused about why the Broncos didn't take a tackle there, and obviously that's something that in retrospect maybe you wish you could have done with the injury to Juwan James that we'll get to in a little bit here. But I like the explosiveness of Javonte Williams. You need somebody like that. You need young players there. Melvin Gordon's going into the last year of his contract, and you didn't give up that much. You know, a 4th round pick, got a 6th round pick back. And then after that, Phil, it was less to me about production as it was about potential. You know, we've seen the Broncos kind of have different philosophies the last few years. In 2018, it was all about team captains and production and proven value. And this year, I think George Payton looked at a lot of guys who are really athletic that the Broncos think with the right coaching, you can get a lot out of. So Baron Browning, for example, in the 3rd round, we heard Vic Fangio say that his versatility hurt him at Ohio State because he didn't have one spot to focus on. They'll find him a spot here, and hopefully he can turn into a really good off-ball inside linebacker if that's where they plan to keep him. A guy like Caden Stearns, who had an incredible freshman season, but then things kind of slipped for him. You know he's got the talent to make things work. Again, you hope with the right coaching and the right attitude, he's able to get that done. Jamar Johnson is a guy that a lot of people thought would go back for one more year and probably could have elevated his draft stock. You buy low on him, but he's got a lot of talent, a lot of athleticism. You think of a guy like Kerry Vincent Jr., who opted out, a slot cornerback. George Payton has said if he can get healthy, he could be among the more talented guys. And so it kind of goes on from there. But really, I thought Seth Williams is another example. And really, there was a focus on special teams for a lot of those day 3 picks. But so I think instead of, you know, some drafts you want to be as safe as you can, and we've talked about this. Does it make more sense this year to just hit doubles or singles instead of trying to hit home runs? But so I think some of these guys could turn out to be really, really valuable pieces of this team that make contributions. And will every one of them pan out? No, the odds of that, just based on what we see in the draft year to year, that's not likely. But I do think if one of them or 2 of them or 3 of them from that day 3 group do hit, they've got the athleticism and the talent to be really good players instead of just, you know, kind of so-so contributors. And so to me, that's what it's exciting. You've got the top 2 picks that are proven players that you know what you're going to get from them, high-end guys. Some people thought Javonte Williams was the best back in this draft ahead of Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. And then you've got a ton of potential with everybody from the 3rd round and beyond.
Yeah, potential and projecting, I think, are 2 big ways to categorize the rest of the picks there, Eric. I agree with you. You know, something George Payton said about his philosophy is you want as many darts as you can, because if you can hit on half of them, then the Broncos just added 5 quality players here in this draft. So
yes,
we know that that's a philosophy he had. And it was a little bit of a different draft than we saw with John Elway recently. You know, Elway really valuing like senior captains, you know, those last couple of drafts. Not a ton of that here in this draft, but more so guys who have tremendous athleticism, guys who maybe have some question marks on them, maybe some guys who, you know, they're looking to get a little bit more out of than they were able to in college. You know, I think was it Browning that Fangio was talking about and said, you know, you see the body there, but the production wasn't quite what you were expecting, like out of this body. So, I think that the Broncos are counting on bringing in these guys and having the right environment, the right coaching. Then they'll be able to get some of these guys to really blossom and become the players that they're capable of playing. Even a guy like Quinn Miners, Eric, coming in from a Division III school, you got to feel good about it, just considering that Mike Munchak, had some input on that selection. So then you're like, okay, well, I sort of trust Munch here. And you put him with Munch's coaching here through the offseason, through training camp. You got to feel good about this guy being able to contribute right away.
Yeah, but I also think what I like about the depth of this roster and what George Paton did in free agency is that really there's not an expectation for any of these guys to contribute right away. Like you would like Surtain and Javonte Williams certainly to have early impacts, but if Browning is a guy that has to focus on special teams initially, it's not the end of the world. Or if Jonathan Cooper makes the roster and is a special teams player and kind of a reserve guy at edge rusher behind Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, and Malik Reed, that's a good position to be in. And you bring these guys along slowly. I mean, good rosters, Phil. You look at a team like the Chiefs or San Francisco, teams that are consistently Seattle, teams that are consistently good year after year. I think you try not to put too much pressure on your rookies and you try to let them kind of come along, and you need contributions from them, obviously, and from your first and second round picks. But the day 2, day 3 guys, you often see them take a step in year 2, year 3. And so to me, it's not the end of the world that you've got a bunch of young guys here that may not see a ton of playing time right away. Secondary to me, Phil, is going to be super interesting. I think the competition there will be intense. You've got Ronald Darby, Kyle Fuller, Bryce Callahan, Pat Surtain, who are all probably capable of starting from day one. Obviously, you can only get 3 of those guys on the field. And then you've got Kerry Vincent Jr., you've got Essang Bassey, you've got Michael Ojemudia, Duke Dawson is still on the team. I mean, there's just a lot, and I'm sure I'm missing Parnell Motley, I believe they brought back on a futures deal. So there's a lot of guys there. Obviously, they're not all going to make the team. It'll be interesting to see kind of how Denver handles that. And then at safety too, Phil, I really like the depth behind Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson now with Keaton Stearns and Jamar Johnson. Those are I really like the Jamar Johnson pick, Phil. I think that he's got a chance to be a really good player for Denver. Kind of that's Justin Simmons-esque, I think, in his ability to pick passes often. I'll be interested to see how he kind of improves over the next couple of years, but a lot to be excited about. It was a best player available, a board-based draft. I think some teams, you get down in the later rounds, they would have just taken a tackle for the sake of taking a tackle. They would have taken a tight end for the sake of taking a tight end, even if they weren't the most talented players. We've seen George Paton say that's when you get into trouble, when you prioritize need in the draft way beyond the talent that's available. That's when you create problems for yourself.
And Peyton, I felt like, was pretty open the whole weekend. He said that they were hoping that a certain player would fall in the first round that they might have traded back in. That was reported to be Jalen Phillips, the edge rusher out of Miami. He all but gave that away. He said that later on they were hoping to try and get a tackle, but a guy that they wanted was picked beforehand. So, it seemed like he trusted his board and said, okay, I'm not comfortable going up that high to get this guy. I'm not willing to make this trade. Some of those things, that patience, I think that showed that even though this was his first time in the head seat, he's been through a lot of drafts, and didn't panic or anything like that. I agree with you, Eric. I like the Jamar Johnson pick too. A kid who had 4 interceptions last year, was second team, I believe, all Big Ten, coming out of Indiana. Guys who have potential that if they come in here and they believe in the coaching, they trust it, and they commit themselves to this process here, I think that they could really make an impact. And George Paton even said that special teams hadn't been where it needed to be the last couple of years, and that really speaks to the team's depth. So adding depth all across the roster was really important.
And I think that you've seen George Payton's patience pay off and his forethought, his foresight. I mean, if you don't get Teddy Bridgewater for a 6th-round pick going into the draft, and you see Justin Fields fall to 7 or 8, and you think Carolina's going to take him, you might feel pressured to move up to 7 to get him. And in that case, you're getting rid of your 2nd-round pick, and all of a sudden, no Javonte Williams for you. And so you're losing an explosive piece there. So that's something where George has consistently given himself options. He hasn't backed himself into a corner. We'll kind of see, Phil, how he's tested this right tackle situation, which we're going to get to, is kind of the first time he has been backed into a corner and has to make a decision like this. But generally during the draft, Phil, I thought he handled things well. Didn't ever make it seem like the rash decision. It seemed like everything was well thought out. And, we won't know for sure for a couple of years here how this draft looks. But from all the early returns in terms of draft experts and what they think, the response to this draft has been overwhelmingly positive, kind of with that caveat of Justin Fields could have been an interesting pick there.
Yeah, that must tell you how much they really like Javonte Williams, that they were like, we got to go up a few spots here and get this guy. So really the only time that they made a move like that. And Eric, I agree. I think there's 2 ways to judge a draft. Obviously, we're not going to know the quality of the players for a couple of years, but I think that you can judge hey, did this guy reach a little bit? Did he trust his board? Did he seem prepared? Did they execute what they wanted to do? And I think all of those things are true with Peyton. We can confidently say that they executed the way that they wanted to. So I think we can give some positive feedback with that. Eric, with that, let's hear from the Broncos' 1st-round pick, the cornerback out of Alabama, the SEC Defensive Player of the Year in 2020, an All-American. Here is Pat Surtain II. Pat, we're standing here overlooking the practice fields. What's it like being now here at the facility?
I'm very excited. It's a special feeling to be here, a part of this tremendous organization. I just can't wait to suit up and play.
There's a long history of defensive backs here, going way back, and even more recently, Champ Bailey, Aqib Talib, Chris Harris Jr. What's it feel like to be a part of that lineage?
It feels great to be a part of that amazing defensive back history, amazing defensive back tradition, just to be a part of that, just working towards to, be on that sort of pedestal and working towards to be on that type of, history mark.
You talked to Jerry Jeudy, your former Alabama teammate, about what it's like playing here in Denver?
Yeah, I talked to him a lot. We talk about the altitude, of course. Being in Denver is a little different. But, he said the fans are very excited. Just to be able to get around with them. This is my first time in Denver, actually. I'm just looking to get around, just be with the fans, of course.
Your dad played in the NFL for a very long time. You went to Alabama. Why do you feel like you're ready to be a pro?
I just felt like I was born ready to be a pro ever since I had a dream of being in the NFL. Just going through my days, I always carry myself a certain type of way, like a professionalized person, just staying the course and staying humble, staying focused on my goals. I think that's what helped shape me get to this point.
Talking about your game, with your size and everything, how do you flow so well out there on the field? Everybody always says you're in great control. You never panic when the ball's in the air.
Yeah, I just go back to my experience playing DB. You can never be too low, never be too high. Stay in between. Just stay focused on what you need to do. Focus on your technique. And, at the main thing at the catch point, I just feel like I'm a natural at it.
We mentioned your dad earlier. Do you have a favorite game, a favorite moment from his career? You mentioned being in the locker room as a kid. Do you have a favorite memory that stands out?
Yeah, memory. it was with the Chiefs. I remember being on the field with him in the coin toss. I believe they played the Saints as well. Just getting that full experience, being able to, just talk to different players, talk to the different teams. It's an all-around feeling. I was 5 years old at the time. I looked at them like giants. Just when I look back at it, it's funny because, just to be in a situation now, it's sort of like vice versa. Hopefully I could be in that type of little kid, wish.
Last one for you here. You dress very nicely, but you don't have the PS2 chain. Instead, you got the earrings on, huh?
Yeah. It's a little showcase. I ain't bring it out yet. I was trying to make a little surprise, but yeah, I'm gonna bring it out certainly. through the next couple of days.
Well, welcome to Denver. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Pat Surtain, the second there. If you're just listening on the podcast, the last part there, we're referencing his earrings that he had on, some look like diamond PS2 earrings, PS on one side, 2 on the other side. Very stylish, Eric. I thought his suit was right on the money.
Yeah, you were all over it was like we had Esquire magazine or something. I mean, you were like, who are you wearing today? Where'd
Eric,
you get
I'll
those
say
diamonds?
this. When you're a first round pick, and maybe even more so if you're a defensive back or you're like a wide receiver, you got to have some style. I'll just say that. You got to have some swagger. You got to have like a persona, a feeling when you're around this guy. My takeaway from, and you were right there with me there, Eric, my takeaway was just quiet confidence. I mean, this guy has a presence, when you just feel, when you're just around him. And I like that. I mean, he does seem like he is pro ready, Eric.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's in terms of winning a press conference and your ability to do that, he did that. He just comes off like a guy that's mature, that has it all together, that's ready to go, can transition easily to the league. You see some of these guys come in sometimes, Phil, and you can just tell they're young. You can tell that this is a big step for them. I don't know if it's because of his dad or, obviously he said his mom has been a huge part of his life and keeping him on track, but it just seems like Pat Surtain was made for this moment.
And this kid has been projected for this role almost his entire life. I mean, when you're a 5-star recruit, you're the top of the top, you play at a big high school where his dad coached him. Then you go to Alabama and you're playing with the best of the best. You're winning national championships. He's ready for this. I like picking kids like that who have just been at the top of everything their whole life. Now he's a first-round pick and ready to play in the NFL. But, Eric, it's natural now to look at some other areas where the Broncos weren't able to really address some needs, some remaining question marks here for the roster. And I think it makes sense to start with right tackle.
Yeah, Phil. Tough news. Jawan James reportedly tearing his Achilles away from the facility on Tuesday. He is going to probably be out for the year, it sounds like. That's tough because the Broncos, they obviously signed him in 2019 with the intention of him finally filling that right tackle spot that they'd really worked since 2014 to fill. And it just didn't work out. He played 3 games, about 60 snaps in 2019 as he battled knee injuries. 2020, he opted out. I don't fault him for that in any way. I don't think you can really consider that as part of the issue here with him being available. I'm not going to fault anyone for ensuring their safety during a very weird season.
Safety was
exactly. But then to have this injury, again, it sounds like he likely won't be with the team. The Broncos could place him on the non-football injury list if they want to, it sounds like. So the Broncos were depending on him, Phil. We've heard George Payton and Vic Fangio say that he looked good, that they expected him to be the starter at right tackle, and now you have a hole here right after the draft. Really inconvenient timing. I mean, maybe Rashawn Slater would have made sense from Northwestern at 9 if this injury had happened a week ago. But you're going to have to figure it out. There's some veteran options. You could move Dalton Risner to right tackle. You could have Calvin Anderson, your in-house candidate, be the guy. But that's just going to be a big question mark going into the season, Phil, because everywhere else on offense, besides quarterback, which we'll talk about, is kind of a done deal. And we've seen, Phil, you saw it in the Super Bowl, teams can win and lose games based on how their tackles, how their offensive lines play. And so they're going to need somebody to come in there. And maybe the hardest thing for me, the last thing I'll say about this, Phil, is injuries are going to happen. You're going to have injuries in training camp. You're going to have injuries during the season. For me, I kind of always look at it as, can your first big injury be as late as possible? Because there's going to be more. This is not going to be the last season-ending injury that a Broncos player suffers. It's unfortunate, but that's just kind of how it goes. And so the fact that in April or May, early May, you've already lost a starter for the year, which chips away at your depth, to me, that just raises the anxiety of, well, what happens if someone goes down in training camp? Because our depth is already tested now. And then what happens if somebody goes down early in the season? You've just kind of started to chip away at that depth earlier than you'd like. Whereas if a starter got hurt, you made it through preseason, you made it through training camp, somebody gets hurt week 1 or week 2, well, at least your depth is still intact for the most part for the rest of the season. For that to start now is just, I don't like it, Phil. It gives me a bad feeling.
Well, and last year for the Broncos, you saw this sort of snowball out of control. Von Miller got hurt in the very first practice, of the season. And then a couple of weeks later, Cortland Sutton done for the year. And then Jarrell Casey. And then it just got out of control there for the Broncos. Hopefully this is just one isolated type of thing. And you just wonder for James, like not playing last season, if, your mind starts to wonder, like, okay, could this have been avoided or not? But the bottom line is the Broncos have to figure out what they want to do at right tackle. Some reports on Wednesday here as we're recording that they're going to meet with a player like Dennis Kelly, started a lot of games. I think this is going to be his 8th season in the NFL. No, he's played 8 seasons in the NFL, started 16 games last year for the Titans. That could be a really good option for the Broncos. I think they're also meeting with Bobby Massey, a 7-year player here in the NFL. So there are some options for some guys who have played a lot of football. And I thought that even last year, DeMar Dotson coming in, I thought that he played pretty well. Elijah Wilkinson had some injuries, an up and down thing there. So I do think there's some options. Maybe you're not going to find the quality of a player like a Jawan James, but at least maybe there's some options out there, Eric. Another position that the Broncos, were rumored to want to address early, a lot of mocks with Micah Parsons to the Broncos, inside linebacker. How do you feel about that position right now?
Yeah, that's one of those positions where I think you're going to need a young guy to step up. I mean, let's be clear. Alexander Johnson and Josie Jewell have been very solid against the run. I think they're good 2-down linebackers at the very least. I think Alexander Johnson in particular has shown, not as much last year, but the year before, showed some potential in pass coverage. And so you just hope that a guy like Baron Browning can come in and give them that boost of athleticism they need to maybe cover a Travis Kelce, to cover a running back out of the backfield. And then the other option, of course, is Justin Strnad, who was a 5th-round pick a year ago, who I think they really liked. I think he was going to be the starting nickel linebacker. He was going to get in there on sub packages and then suffered that wrist injury that ended his year before it began. He's kind of an addition that will show up just because he didn't play last year. So there's potential. I think the depth is thin there. I think maybe you could see, maybe there's a possibility that later in training camp or the closer we get to the season that they add a veteran there the way they did a year ago. I mean, the list is bad. I can't even remember the name of the veteran that they added last year because
the Steelers player. Yeah.
Barron, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Mark Barron. Yeah.
Mark Barron.
Now they've gone to Baron Browning, hoping that this Barron goes a little bit better, obviously.
But didn't Vic say that he wants Barron to line up at outside to start here?
No, inside to start.
Inside to start. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. And so I do think the depth is a little thin there. We'll have to see. But Phil, I will say the tight end position has not challenged the Broncos the same way in Vic Fangio's defense, the way that it had in 2016 through 2018. There are still times when, Darren Waller's had a nice game or Travis Kelce's had a nice game, but so they're really good players. I mean, that's not necessarily an indictment on the Broncos' ability to cover those guys. So, inside linebacker is a position that I'm sure the Broncos would like a little bit more depth, would like a little bit more star power, but I think they're okay. And on that defense, I think there's enough talent around them at outside linebacker. Certainly that secondary, you'd hope, would give guys more time to get to the passer if you're Bradley Chubb or Von Miller, which should then in turn help the inside backers. It's definitely I don't want to say the weak spot on the defense, but the position I have the most questions about. But I think the rest of the group around them should be good enough to kind of to help with that.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I must have got that confused because I think that Barron himself said that he's more comfortable playing outside. I think that's where I got that confused.
We're here, Phil. We're here for you to give us the emotion and the fans' perspective.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. We're back to normal.
He said that he's more comfortable out playing outside. Eric, I agree with you. I think that Josie Jewell and Alexander Johnson are quality NFL starters, but at the end of the day, they are limited by their athleticism. I mean, they are who they are. They're not going to be like Devin White, where they're sprinting and they're going to beat a tackle, to the edge, and they're going to get around him and make the tackle in the backfield. That's just not going to happen. So I think that you can count on them to be, they have the headset. They're connected with Vic on defense. They're delivering the play calls. They know where people are supposed to be. They know how to fill gaps and make tackles when they need to, but they're never going to be that like crazy athlete that's like really just somebody that you fear, in that middle linebacker. But that being said, the talent all around them makes this a top 3 defense. So that position I'm not too concerned about, especially because those two now have been in the league for a while. I mean, Josie got a lot of playing time last year when the Broncos decided to move on from Todd Davis, and Alexander Johnson has now really played for a year and a half as that starting linebacker. So I do feel good about the experience that they have there.
And I just think that it's going to be hard for, is it impossible for teams to take advantage of inside linebackers in the passing game enough to like change the game? Yeah, but I think it's difficult. When you've got a really good pass rush and you've got a good defensive line and you've got a really ridiculously good secondary, if you're going to try to target inside linebackers, one-on-one on slants or seam routes with your running back kind of there in the slot, I mean, good luck. It's going to work a few times. I'm skeptical that a team is going to be able to consistently move the ball on you the entire game that way, in a way that makes, that you're not going to be able to stop it. And I thought one quote from George Payton, I think he told this to our friend Mike Kliss, Phil, was that Vic is one of the best defensive minds in the game. Let's give him the pieces to go show what he can do. Because the strategy the last 2 years, it seems, has been Vic could take you, Phil, and turn you into probably not an average NFL linebacker, but maybe you could make the practice squad or something. I mean,
I don't think so.
he can take players and elevate their games. And the thought has been add to the offense and see what Vic can do with the defense. Now it's like, let's give Vic elite defensive talent and see how good he can make that group. And so I trust in Vic and his scheme to kind of make things work with the personnel they have in place.
And really, it could be the first time we see Von Miller and Bradley Chubb healthy together with Vic. The secondary, maybe the best safety duo in the NFL, and then the rest of the pieces there on the outside. We'll talk about this in a future episode, Eric, but probably the best secondary in the NFL at this point. At least the argument definitely could be made there. Just let Vic be creative. I mean, you don't have to have 2 linebackers line up in the middle of the field there like that. So yeah, you could play around with things and just get the best talent out there on the field. And I think that the Broncos will be able to do that. There's one other position we got to talk about, Eric. There's one more.
Tight end.
Quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people thought that when Justin Fields was available there, that was going to be the pick. I think everybody was geared up for that. Of course, that did not happen. Before the draft even started, Twitter was going crazy with Aaron Rodgers. It's still going crazy with Aaron Rodgers. And when the dust settles here, or at least when it did at the end of the draft, George Payton said, I feel really good about the 2 guys in Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock having a competition and seeing who is eventually the Broncos starter.
Yeah, and I'll just say, if something happens at some point, Phil, with Aaron Rodgers, and that becomes a reality, we will spend an entire episode. We'll spend 3 episodes. I'll spend days live on Twitter Spaces talking about it. Okay.
Well, he'll have a reoccurring segment on the Neutral Zone.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see if he's up for that hypothetically.
But he would not be, but we'll talk about him.
Yes.
Every week.
Yes. So if that happens, I will dedicate so much time to that you will all of you members of Neutral Zone Nation will be very happy. I'm not devoting time to that right now because he's on another team. They've said that they don't want to trade him. It would be a lot of speculation for something that who knows if it happens or not.
It's fun to think about, but
it is. But for now, I'll focus on the two guys who are on the roster
who
we know can compete. In Teddy Bridgewater, we know that George Payton thinks that he's a guy that operates the offense with ease, very smooth player. He's not going to turn the ball over a ton. He's probably not going to make you a game-winning play, but he's also probably not going to lose you the game. He's a very steady player. And then in Drew, of course, you've got a guy who can make these big plays, make the big-time throws, has all the talent in the world. I think probably Phil has a higher ceiling than Teddy Bridgewater. I don't think that it's a stretch to say that.
At this point, yeah.
But also, I think he's got a lower floor than Teddy based on what we've seen in terms of his inability to kind of cut down on those turnovers. So I think if you get the best version of one of those players, and hopefully they push each other to be that, you can be in the playoff mix. Do I think you're going to go 13-3, 13-4, 14-3? It's going to take a while to get used to that 17 game math, but I'm not sure about that, Phil. But do I think you could get to that 10 win range and push for a playoff spot? I think that with the depth of this team around you, you can get there. I kind of see this competition, Phil, and maybe the last big competition there was in 2016. Trevor Siemian, Mark Sanchez, Paxton Lynch kind of involved in there. And the way Trevor won the job was not necessarily by, making incredible plays. It was that Mark Sanchez continued to turn the ball over in the preseason. And Gary Kubiak essentially decided, we can't hurt our football team like this. We cannot do that. And they went with Trevor Siemian. They ended up winning 9 games, finishing just a game short of the playoffs. Trevor got hurt a couple of games in there. It'll be interesting to see in retrospect what would have happened. But I could see a similar situation, Phil. If Teddy goes out and he's the steady guy, it could come down to, is Drew Lock able to cut down on these turnovers and make the big play? And if he continues to turn the ball over, I think they're very easily going to go to Teddy and say, we can't, with the roster we've assembled around this team, we can't give away games anymore.
I mean, there is a notion out there that Teddy is like this safer veteran type of quarterback. He threw 11 interceptions last year. He did turn the ball over. And even when he was in Minnesota, like his rookie year, he had 12 interceptions. His second year, he had 9, of course. And then he didn't, he had the injury. And then in New Orleans as a backup there, cut down on his totals. But he has turned the ball over a little bit here during his career. So I do think he tends to be the safer of the two, just because he has a lot more experience than Drew. And, of course, it's hard to compare. It's not really apples to apples because you're talking about a lot of weapons on this Broncos team that he didn't really have last year in Carolina. Certainly with Christian McCaffrey being injured so much, he just didn't have the team around him. So maybe he had to force it a little bit more. But
his interception rate is more than 1% lower than Drew's. So it's certainly a little bit better in that regard. And Drew also did struggle with some fumbles. So you're right that he's not immune to turnovers, but I do think he's a safer option in that area.
I think when it boils down to me, you just know what Teddy is about. You've seen him be out there and play a lot of football. Drew is still very much a question mark. Did he improve a lot this offseason? Did he take that step that we've desperately been waiting to see from him? Maybe he has. I mean, he's just so much more of an unknown. So when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, they might just say, okay, this guy's still an unknown and we're not willing to take that risk right now. Let's go with Teddy. Or they might say, dang, Drew is really taking a jump here. Let's go with him. And we always have Teddy just in case. So that's, I feel like, the balance that they'll have to strike here. And we won't really know until training camp comes and they're out there until preseason games when it's on. let's see how they carry themselves. One of the things that Drew even's got to take care of is just being healthy. He's got to be available, and at times he has really struggled with that. So,
do you have an early guess of who you think will be the week 1 starter? And I'll let you change this closer to training camp or before.
I mean, it's really, I would say I have no idea. George Payton, I think he said it's 50-50 right now. But Michael Silver in his story said that he felt like maybe Teddy Bridgewater was ahead. I'll say Drew, just for the fact that he's been here, he's worked with Pat Shurmur, and you're hoping that he's taken this step this offseason. I know Teddy Bridgewater has some familiarity there with Pat from Minnesota, and so does George and stuff. But I do feel like just having been in this system now for a second year for Drew, I think is going to give him a little bit of a heads up. And I'm confident that Drew's been working hard and that he has taken this next step. I'm confident that the Drew Lock we'll see come out for the start of training camp will be much better than the Drew Lock we saw last season.
Yeah. Here's one more question for you, Phil, because I think that if Drew Lock is the day 1 starter, Teddy can still be in Denver as a backup and be a good one. If Teddy becomes the week 1 starter and or just is the starter, is that the end of the Drew Lock era?
Well, Drew would be the backup, obviously, and who knows if Teddy got hurt and Drew went out and had a lot of success, maybe he could really spark something and keep that job. So I don't think that's necessarily case closed, but it wouldn't be great. I think that for all young quarterbacks who come into the league, you sort of have this vision of, okay, I'm going to struggle for a little bit. I'm going to get better. I'm going to get more comfortable. I'm going to have some growing pains, but I'm going to be on the ascension there where eventually I'm going to get it. Not too many quarterbacks have that struggle, feel like they got it, regress, have a difficult second season, and then lose a job, and then eventually get it. That's not really the path for a lot of these guys.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think for Drew to be the long-term guy here, he's got to win this competition over the summer, and I think he probably realizes that in some ways he's gotten a little bit of a second lease on life here because the Broncos did not draft Justin Fields or Mac Jones because had they taken one of those guys, the writing would have been on the wall. I think Drew still does have a real chance to keep this job. But he got his second chance, so to speak, and now he's got to take advantage of it if he wants to be the long-term guy.
And there's no question about it, Eric. We know the Broncos made a move to try and see if they could get Stafford. They made a call. I mean, that didn't work out. There's rumors about Aaron Rodgers. It's not like the Broncos are sitting here and saying we're thrilled with how everything's gone. They want to see it from Drew. I think they like Drew. They hope that he can take that step, but they want to see it. And they're not afraid to say we're going to go explore other options if it doesn't work out. So that sort of leads us into our next category here, Eric, and that's the final one for this episode. Is on paper, does this Broncos team look like a playoff team to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can answer some of those questions, who's at right tackle, is inside linebacker, are they good enough there to match up with some of these tight ends? Can you win some of these close games that you've been in? I think that requires Vic Fangio taking a step forward. We know George Payton has been big in analytics. We'll see if anything on game day kind of changes there. You need some of these guys to stay healthy, just like any team does, but I think you've now got the depth you need. And from what we've heard, Phil, around the league, many people are saying this is a top 5 roster on the team in the league. And so it really just does come down to, can you get good enough play at the quarterback position? And there's a lot of people that I think are saying, well, just the answer is no, they're not good enough to do that. And I would remind people, Phil, that last year the Broncos were beating Kansas City in Kansas City with a beat up roster because of how Vic with third string defensive players, because of how Vic Fangio's defense was playing. And if if you convert on a final drive, you might win that game. There were some duds in there. Certainly Buffalo in December came in here and just kind of had their way with Denver. I know Vic Fangio wasn't very happy with that situation, but the Broncos, I think, were closer to certain opponents than, with a beat up roster, with, to put it frankly, like poor play at times from Drew Lock. When he played well, this team was right in it. And so again, it's all going to come down to the quarterback position, but I do think that both Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater at their ceiling, or even at their, the expected value, they can play well enough to win you these games. Are you going to go, again, 14-3, 15-2, 16-1? I don't know. That's probably a stretch when you don't have that true franchise quarterback, but they've made enough plays in this league, Phil, and shown that they can, win you games. And so I think the Broncos have the 7th or 8th easiest schedule in the league this year because they play the last place teams in a couple of these divisions. I think if you can kind of rack up some of those wins, finally get one against the Chiefs, split against the Chargers, maybe sweep the Raiders, there's a path, certainly, and I don't think it requires a miracle in Aaron Rodgers being traded here to wind up in that playoff conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's like a mix of things that needs to go right for this team. They need to stay healthy. They need young guys to be able to take a little bit of a step here. But ultimately, it's going to come down to Drew. I mean, that's just the bottom line, or Teddy. I mean, they've just got to get better quarterback play if they want to take that step as a team. Eric, when I look at this roster, it's hard to not compare it to, like, say, 2011, 2012, where the rest of the roster is really solid. And in your mind, you're like, if they just get this quarterback play, they could really contend for something. Of course, in that situation, 2012, insert Peyton Manning, they have the best record in the entire AFC. They're the number 1 seed. And of course, they went on to win a Super Bowl. When you look at this team, the roster outside of quarterback is very similar. So, whether that is Aaron Rodgers or just simply Drew Lock playing better, this team could really take a massive jump. And I know we talked about that so much last season. I mean, you and I were drinking the Kool-Aid. We were stirring the Kool-Aid and we were passing it out, and then we were drinking it ourselves too, because I think we both really thought that the team was going to make the playoffs last year. But they just didn't get that jump from the quarterback position. So I think that if you're able to play really strong defense, get better quarterback play, and to me, that means just don't wreck the game. I know Drew talks about this a lot, where he's like, I know I got to be more of a manager. I know I can't take these risks. He's got to be about that too, Eric. He can't just talk about it. He's got to be about that. And if he is, I do think the Broncos could make the playoffs. We'll see what happens with Justin Herbert. They fired that coaching staff there. You got a new coaching staff, a new system coming in there. We'll see what happens. There's more tape on him. We'll see what happens from year 1 to year 2 for Justin Herbert. We know what Patrick Mahomes is going to be. So I think that on paper, Eric, this looks like a playoff team for the Broncos, but not a team that's going to beat the Chiefs in the division. You think that's fair?
Yeah, I think that, I'm not going to guarantee a playoff berth. I don't think that's fair after 4 consecutive seasons where you don't have a winning record. And I think you've got to at least am going to take a more tempered approach going into this year, just because we did see last year when you thought you had a talented roster and ended up winning 5 games, I believe. So, and a lot of that was injuries, but you've got to get off to a better start. I mean, they've been 0-7 in September the last 2 years to start the year, which just ruins your playoff chances before you even begin. So let's see if this team can get off to 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, somewhere in there, and at least have a chance. And then they've got to avoid these streaks where you lose 2 or 3 in a row several times a year, because those kill your season. They've got to be better, in a more micro level. Third down, offensively, they have to be better. They've got to be better in certain situations. I mean, how many times last year, Phil, did we see a key fumble, a key drop, a key interception, a key defensive breakdown, or maybe not a breakdown, but just, letting a receiver come up with a ball or them get a big first down that just kind of it took any chances of you winning and dissipated them. So those are all things that have to happen. But I mean, Phil, I've said this many times. The fact of the NFL, life in the NFL, when you don't have a franchise quarterback or like a top 5 guy, you kind of live in that middle space, where you're always going to be somewhere between, like, I'm going to use the old records, but somewhere between 6-10 and 10-6. And if you win, if you push one of those games to a win or 2 of those games to a win, maybe you make the playoffs. If the next year 2 of those don't go your way, maybe you fall out of the playoffs. The Broncos have been on the wrong side of that, but I do think it's possible you can operate in that range, but your margin for error is just so much smaller when you don't have that. And so, Phil, they might go out and beat the Chiefs if they play really well and the defense has a really good game. And then the next week, if they turn the ball over a couple times, they could have a clunker against the Detroit Lions and lose. And that's just, I think, no matter how talented your roster is, when your quarterback play is not at that upper echelon, that's just kind of what you live with from week to week. And that's what the Chargers dealt with this last year. It's what we see the Falcons deal with from time to time. Even the Bills in Josh Allen's second year kind of dealt with that. Tennessee with Ryan Tannehill. I mean, there's a whole group of teams that is kind of in that middle tier of players. And so that's the story to me. It's just there's not a lot of room for error. You kind of pointed that out, but this is if they make it, Phil, I think it's going to be close.
We know one thing: they'll be built to do all the other things right. They're going to play good defense. And with the addition of Javonte Williams, they're going to be able to run the ball here, so they're going to be able to run the ball and play good defense. So those are big parts of the formula here in order to have success and to be able to win tight games, to be able to win in the playoffs. You got to be able to do those 2 things: run the ball, play good defense. This team is built to be able to do those things. If some things fall the right way, I really do think there's a lot to be optimistic about, considering the roster's good. We just need a little bit better quarterback play. Eric, I think it's time to get to our favorite part of the show, and that's shout-outs. And, probably shout out Liz Manis, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, some in-person community events this week.
Yeah.
Kind of a nice change of pace. It's fun.
So they did they made some packages in the field house, I think. Nice to see some players get out into the community, do some stuff instead of just some Zooms. Also, I know that they've got some stuff planned for Mental Health Awareness Month. That's May, doing some mental health stuff with Dr. Nicole Lennon, Eric. So
yeah,
nice,
valuable addition to the team last year. Really was.
Should also shout out Broncos Batman. He left he left a voicemail here for us, Eric, and we love our voicemails.
We do love voicemails.
We just do. So let's go ahead and play Broncos Batman's email here. The return. Broncos Batman.
Hey guys, this is Bronco Batman. Day after the draft, and what a draft it was. This was crazy to think Fields was still on the board. Everybody was clamoring for Fields, but you know what? George Payton stuck with Patrick Surtain the second. I think it's a great pick. It's kind of showing what we're going to do for the future as far as, all the cornerbacks that we got with 1-year contracts. So it's kind of showing that we're already preparing for next year's draft, off season and stuff. But I think he's a great player. I'm happy that he is sticking with Drew Lock, / Teddy Bridgewater, I was a little disappointed, from all the hype from Fields, I was kind of 50-50, but, I'm glad we went this direction. So anyway, go Broncos. Excited for what this season has to come. Great show as always, guys. Keep rocking the hair. Bronco Batman out.
Eric, Broncos Batman sounded a little bit tired there, probably analyzing the draft, but we appreciate his phone call. He liked the Pat Surtain pick, so he's on board with that.
We love it. If Broncos Batman is on board, we got everybody on board.
Yes. They put the signal out, and he answered the call. He delivered with the voicemail, and he says that he likes what George Payton did in this first draft. So Eric, anything else that you want to talk about here? Or time to wrap up the
I
show.
got one for you, Phil. I wonder
Ooh.
if you could pick. We got, by the time we put out our next episode, Phil, maybe we'll talk a little bit about the schedule next week. I'm sure we will, because I love it more than anything in the entire world. Is who would be an ideal opponent to open up with if you could pick a week 1 game for the Broncos? Who would it be? And I can give people a reminder here of who these future opponents are, if that's helpful for you, Phil. But if you know them off the top of your head.
I mean, not helpful for me, but
for the rest
I know
of
what. Yeah. I mean, I know that the Broncos are playing the NFC East, Eric. So that means the Washington football team, Dallas, the Giants, and the Eagles.
So in addition to the division opponents, they've got the Eagles, the Washington football team, the Bengals, the Ravens, and the Jets, and the Lions at home.
So you're going crazy. Okay, here.
At home. And then on the road, they play Cleveland, Dallas, the Giants, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville, and then the 3 division opponents. So do any of those stand out to you, Phil, as a real exciting week 1 matchup?
We just talked about how important it would be for the Broncos to get off to a good start, right? So last year, the schedule didn't do them any favors, having to face the Titans week 1. That was difficult considering they had just played in the conference championship game the year before. Then you got the Steelers on the road. Steelers are always a solid football team. So I would say the team that gives you the best chance to win, Eric. And so, I mean, hard to just bash one of these teams, but maybe just based off of what we saw last season, maybe the Jets at home would be nice. You got a rookie quarterback probably making his debut. If that was on the road, being here in Denver, that would be a positive. So I'd say maybe the Jets, maybe the Lions, being able to start out at home would be ideal. If you're just asking me what's ideal, how about those 2 teams playing here at home?
That'd be fun. I'll say against the Raiders. I don't like
home or away. Well,
let's get the road game out of the way.
You're saying this is the ideal start, is what you're saying. You're not predicting what's going to happen, but you're saying ideally the Broncos would go on the road and face a division opponent. That's what you're saying. You
are really grumpy about this.
No, I'm just wondering.
I think, this is not what I'm predicting to happen, but I think it would be a really good thing for this team to go out there and get a win against the Raiders in week 1 on the road. They haven't beaten them in Oakland, Phil, I think since 2015.
That's interesting because they don't play there anymore, so that would be hard.
Oh my gosh. In Las Vegas. They've never won there.
Yeah, that's better, yeah.
But, Vegas pushed them around a little bit in Las Vegas last year, and then to end the season the way they did, kind of that last second, I believe, 2-point conversion, right, to get the win, left a bad taste in my mouth. You never like losing to the Raiders, even if it did help the Broncos get a better draft slot. So go out there, send a message week 1. A couple years ago, the Broncos went out to Oakland for week 1 on Monday Night Football and did not do so well. It'd be nice to go out there and set the tone, finally get a road AFC West win. I think that would go a long way toward giving this team confidence. Not that beating a Jets team or a Jaguars team, Lions team would be nice, but I think beating a team like the Raiders would give this team a boost of confidence going into the rest of the year.
So why don't you just say on the road in Arrowhead to play the Chiefs then, using that sort of thought process? Why wouldn't you just say that?
I'm a realist, Phil.
Oh, got it. Because I'm sure that would give them some confidence, wouldn't it, Eric?
That would too. You want to change your pick?
No, because I've used actual.
You want him to open up against a D3 school. You want him to go play Wisconsin Whitewater in week 1.
Okay, let me call my friends up in Detroit. They would not like you to say that.
That's what you said.
Some people in New York might have some different thoughts. I'm saying schedule-wise, it would be best if they could build their confidence up with a win. So in order to schedule-wise do that, what would be most likely to help do that would be at home against a team that did not have a good record last year. So Jets, Lions.
So you want to play the guys that are Vic Fangio's size that Quinn Miners was pushing around.
Yeah. I'm just saying
up in Whitewater.
And also, if the Broncos are able to have fans back at home, let's just get the party started. Let's get the fans back in the stands. Let's get it started. They've been itching for some Broncos football right off the bat. A nice win at home. That's what I think would be ideal, Eric.
Fans want to see an exciting game in week 1. They want to see a quality opponent. They don't want to watch the Lions.
If you want something exciting, how about facing the number 1 pick from last year, Trevor Lawrence, going on the road? That would be a big matchup, right? Urban Meyer's debut as Jacksonville's head coach.
Okay, so you're just picking like 3 or 4 different options here. Is that what's happening?
No, I'm going to say
time to wrap it up.
I'm saying the best option would be like Jets at home is what I would say. Schedule-wise, that would be the ideal way to open the season. You say on the road against the Raiders.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see.
You're already dressed for the Raiders game. You got your Al Davis look going.
I always love every year the story of Al Davis meeting Darth Vader comes out, because of May the 4th, which was earlier this week, Eric. And he's like, is Darth Vader? Amazing. Yeah. But I do maintain that's probably the most hurtful thing you've ever insulted me with, is saying I look like.
I didn't say it was an insult. I was just
no, it is an insult.
Okay, I'm not saying that. To be clear, this post goes viral. I'm not saying it's
as a lifelong Broncos fan, saying that I look or dress like Al Davis is an insult, regardless of what you think about Al Davis. Me being a Broncos fan, that's an insult.
Got it.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like
all right.
that has nothing to do with Al Davis. It's just from my perspective, that's an insult.
Yeah, you are definitely you're definitely in your feelings here.
That would be like if I said you dress like Jim Harbaugh. As a Northwestern fan, you'd be like, no, I don't. That's an insult.
Not really. I pretty much concern myself as a Cats fan with teams that we might face in the Big Ten championship. So I'm not too worried about Harbaugh in Michigan.
I was going to say, like, what is a Northwestern? Like, what's a rival to Northwestern? Like running out of batteries for your calculator? Like maybe that's what you dress like. You dress like a low life battery.
Got it.
Yeah. Maybe your computer while you're typing an essay is running out of juice. That's what you dress like.
Oh, yeah. Man, that hurts.
Yeah.
That hurts.
Maybe you've got a class that's across campus and you're going to be a minute late.
A whole minute?
That's what you're dressed like.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. That's what you're dressed like. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to leave the CU roasts alone because I don't want to alienate the fan base.
Yeah. You had 2 Northwestern players drafted in the first round. That's a big deal.
Football factory.
Yeah. That's pretty impressive. I'll say that, Eric. Congratulations.
I don't think Ohio State had that. I don't think Michigan had that. I think Alabama and maybe one other school were the only ones who had that. Pretty impressive, if you ask me.
I think Alabama had 6 players drafted in the first round.
At least 2.
5 of them on offense.
Northwestern.
5 of them on offense.
Alabama.
Yeah, 5 on offense, and the other was Surtain. So, yeah, that's
status still true.
Yeah. Who is that? That was the 2 wide receivers.
Alabama?
Yeah.
Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith.
Smith.
Alex Leatherwood.
Yep. Najee Harris, and then Mac Jones.
And, of course, our guy, Pat Surtain.
Sir
Pat Surtain II.
Sir Pat Surtain II, yeah.
Yeah.
Move over, Sir Lloyd Cushenberry.
Yeah, sorry, Lloyd.
Sorry. Yeah. All right. Well, if you'd like to be a part of next week's show where we're talking about the schedule, go ahead and leave a voicemail, 707-NEUTRAL. That's how you can get involved with the show. You could also leave a comment down below if you're watching here on YouTube. Smash that subscribe button. Eric, how else do they get involved?
Leave an email at neutralzoneshow@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on the schedule once you get them.
Yeah. And then also hit us up on Twitter at Eric Dalala with an A, at Phil Milani with a PH. So we'll be back next week breaking down the Broncos schedule. So exciting, Eric. I know. Just can't handle it.
It is exciting. People get to know. It could be the first time people are back in full force at Empower Field in a long time. you're making fun of people, but it's an exciting time.
It is an exciting time. Although you want the Broncos to start on the road against the Raiders.
More home games for later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The number of home games doesn't change.
But more, you get more of them later.
Oh, got it.
Like open, you leave a nice little Christmas present for later. You want to leave the biggest one. So
I understand. It's like you eat all your vegetables first and then you save the good stuff.
Exactly.
Then
you go to the steak.
I understand now.
Yeah.
That's put it in my kind of terms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Eat little lettuce first, then meat. Yeah. Do you get it?
Now I see. Now I've seen the light. Yeah, I see the light now. Thank you, Eric. And once again, thanks to Pat Surtain II for taking some time to chat here. And we're happy to bring that conversation to NZ Nation. We'll be back next week. Until then, for Eric Dalala, I'm Phil Milani. You've been listening to
The Neutral Zone.